If we're really serious about collaborating, then we're really serious about the subject of conversation. Collaboration has very little meaning if we're not starting to pay a different quality of attention to what's happening in our conversations. Conversation is inescapable. Obviously, you might say conversation is the core process in any organization, in any work setting. But we actually spend very little time really paying attention to the quality of those conversations, which in turn means paying real attention to the quality of our listening. We have a little model we've been using for many years to help people understand the shifts that are possible and needed in the quality of listening. Most of the time, in most settings, we're kind of in this place. We're kind of barely listening. This is like, well, oh, you've been talking, that's right. Oh, great. And you suddenly realize that we're really not paying very much attention. Otto Scharmer has another term he likes to use here. He calls it downloading. Because oftentimes, even when we are paying attention, we're busy projecting. The person says something and we immediately say, oh yeah, that's what I've heard him say before. Oh, that's so-and-so, and she's always on that, or whatever. We're continually projecting our internal assumptions and expectations onto the situation. So even when we're kind of nominally listening, we're really paying as much or more attention to our own internal projections than to what a person is actually saying. Over here we have something that we've come to call objective listening. We are paying attention. If you're in a debate, you can't afford to do this. You're never going to do very well in the debate, because to be a good debater, you've got to really pay attention to what the other person is saying. You might say this is what a recording device is doing. A recording device is listening objectively. It's actually paying attention to what's said. In this objective listening mode, there is a different quality of listening from a technical, or you might say data gathering perspective. That's why I use the analogy of the recording device. But we're not necessarily really paying attention to the person. Up here, we have something that would typically be called empathetic listening. The difference between here and here is here we're paying attention not only to what's said, but who's saying it. There is a lived experience behind what this person is saying. And you know that sometimes, every once in a while, it hits you that, oh, wow, this person's experience is actually really different than mine. Or their way of thinking about a situation, their way of seeing it is really different than mine. This has to do with men and women. This has to do with people from different cultures. This has to do with people with very different professional experiences. It doesn't really matter. Here, at this point, the real difference in the experience sitting behind the words is starting to become apparent to me. As you might imagine, the quality of conversations is very much influenced by this quality of listening. Down here, we have what's going on most of the time in most conversations. You go to a cocktail hour or just meet somebody, and of course the conversation is polite. In a team setting, one of our mentors in this field long ago, a man named Chris Arges, used to call this talking nice. So teams almost always start off here. And they're polite. They're, you might say, observing the social norms, things we talk about, things we don't talk about. For example, in a lot of teams, it's really not considered the norm to talk about your personal world. You know, if I'm worried about my kid is sick, I don't bring that into most teams because it's task-oriented and it's polite. The only problem with this is a lot of issues don't get addressed. And invariably, teams that start off down here talking nice, some people start to get frustrated. Well, yeah, we've had this meeting, and how long is it going to go? We've had the same conversation 23 times. Sooner or later, someone breaks out and talks more candid. Chris Arges used to call this talking tough. The trajectory of most teams, invariably, they start off here, and because of frustration or because of some really practical, difficult issues are not getting addressed, they venture over into here. And they have a different conversation. You come to a meeting and somebody says, hey, look it, we've talked about this forever. When are we going to really tell the truth? We know the program doesn't work, or whatever. Somebody really expresses themselves more candidly, and somebody else is upset. The problem why we don't start over here is it's often not very polite. This can hurt people's feelings. People start to surface the differences in their view. Here there's kind of a sameness. Eventually it gets kind of boring. Here, difference really comes out. The problem is difference often can lead to some emotional consequences. So if you look at the trajectory of most teams, they kind of venture over here, they have a tough conversation, people's feelings are hurt, and they go back to here. And then a little later, somebody else, and you kind of oscillate. So if you do a little graph of the trajectory of most teams, you have them oscillating between politeness and candor, talking nice and talking tough. The reason this empathetic listening is so important is when a team starts to venture over this line, the quality of the conversation really does shift. We've always called this the territory of reflective conversation. And reflective conversation is something that people really notice when it happens, and they really value. A reflective conversation is a meeting that ends and you leave and go, wow, really going to have to think about this some more. We've been really operating in this way, but I realize now that there really are options. You're starting to reflect on your own assumptions. And invariably, people will characterize this as having a different quality of energy. It's more engaging. This cycle, obviously, people feel like, oh, that's kind of a waste of time. Do we really have to have this meeting? And why can't we do the meeting in 20 minutes instead of 35? Or whatever. Because it's not generating a lot of value that couldn't have happened without having the meeting. Did we really need to have that meeting? People don't feel that way up here. You might think about collaborating. Why do we collaborate? We collaborate in order to get something done that we couldn't get done on our own. So this is the domain, in my experience, where real collaboration starts to occur. It's very natural. You start off down here, spend a lot of time down here, but once you start to get to what people often call real conversations, then people start to realize that, yeah, there's something here we could do together that couldn't just be done by me doing my own thing, or you doing your own thing, and each of us doing our own thing. Now, there is a fourth type of conversation, and it's what happens when that reflective conversation continues to deepen. There's a traditional term for this fourth type of conversation. It's called dialogue. It's a very old word. It's a Greek word. Dia means through. Log comes from the Greek logos, meaning. Flow of meaning through. Dialogos, the Greek root of the word dialogue. The listening that allows this to occur is difficult to characterize. It's very, very well understood in the performing arts and music. People will talk about being in the flow. In theater, in dance, whenever people are performing together, I guarantee you they know this distinction. Here, the whole is listening to the whole, so to speak. Again, it's hard to express it in a simple English phrase, so I'm just going to put listening to the whole. But it's a conversation where something new really emerges that wasn't there before. People in the world of innovation put a great deal of stock on this and this, because why have a meeting? Why collaborate? Unless something really new emerges that would not have emerged if we had continued to do things in the way we've traditionally done them. So this evolution of conversation and listening is really quite crucial to the field of innovation, because it's only when we get above this line that the future is starting to speak. Down here is all dominated by the past. So in the territory of innovation, collaboration is vital for something new to emerge that wouldn't otherwise emerge. And when you go one step deeper, you realize that what that's really all about is the quality of conversation. And since neither you or I as individuals can magically transform the quality of conversation, guess what we can pay attention to? the quality of our listening.